We got three presenters today. We're going to start with Wayne Zocker. I think he gets to present every year, so everybody should know who he is. He's been with the department for 20 years in various capacities. And then we got Michael Johnson. He serves as our urban engineer, MPO guy. He's been with the DOT for about 19 years. And then Theresa serves as Stantec's Midwest Transportation Operations Leader, and she's been in that role for about 23 years. So help me welcome these guys.
Good morning. I have about 10 minutes to talk about the changes that are occurring right now through as a result of the 2020 census. I'm going to try to keep it at a high level, can find myself into detail. But the 2020 census did result in a number of changes for North Dakota. We have our first TMA in Fargo being designated, and we have our first new MPO in 40-ish years. So up in Minot. Again, I've already broke my rule and didn't stay away from the acronyms, but I've found that the planning side does have a lot of acronyms, just like the engineering side, but shortly you can probably speak into the acronyms also. To start off, a couple of the acronyms that are used on a regular basis, MPA is Metropolitan Planning Area, the MPO is Metropolitan Planning Organization, TMA, the Transportation Management Area, and UZA is an urbanized area. Now, urbanized area is not the same as an urban area. Urban area is an area of 5,000 or more. The MPO is 50,000 or more, and then the TMA has 200,000 or more. North Dakota has 13 urban areas, but they also include, or of that 13, Minot, Bismarck, Mandan, Grand Forks, Fargo, and West Fargo are also part of MPOs. We have the 4 MPOs. FM MetroCog is also the TMA. So you can almost think of MPOs and TMA similar to all squares are rectangles, but not all rectangles are squares. So all TMAs are going to be an MPO, but not all MPOs are TMAs. The UZA is census defined, and then the MPO can go and round out or smooth out corners, but that's the area that's expected to be urbanized in the next 5 years. The MPA is similar, only it's the area outside of the UZA that's expected to be urbanized in the next 20 years. Now, our latest urban area is Watford City. Watford City was 2020 census put it at 6,000 people, give or take. It was just above Valley City. Watford City is now eligible to take part in the urban funding programs, required to take a more frequent look at long-range planning outlooks. They are in the process of wrapping up their first LRTP. There I broke my rule again. The LRTP is a long-range transportation plan. But is North Dakota becoming a more urbanized state? Now, I went through and back to the 2000 census, and then I had 2010 and 2020. And the brown area is the North Dakota state population. The orange area is our urbanized population, our MPO populations, and how that's expanded. On the right, that is the urban breakdown, or the MPO breakdown from 2020. North Dakota overall, the North Dakota population was 779,094 people. The urbanized area of that was 375,967. Bismarck-Mandan area had about 26.1% of that 375,000. Our new MPO in Minot, or Central Dakota MPO, had 13.5%. Fargo, our new TMA, had a 44.6%, and Grand Forks, East Grand Forks, had 15.7%. Now, Central Dakota MPO, Minot area. What does this mean for them? It ensures regional cooperation in the transportation planning. Minot, Ward County, and the Minot District of North Dakota DOT did a very good job prior to being designated as an MPO with coordinating their project efforts, their planning efforts. This is now a more formalized process. It also puts into place a continuing cooperative and comprehensive, or 3C, planning process. The UZA in Minot is the area that's shown here in the purple. It is Minot, Surrey, and Ward County. Burlington is part of the MPA. Some of our general timelines, the official designation, or the official census, was released on December 29th of 2022. We started holding some internal discussions. How do we best move Minot in? How do we best help Minot coordinate the MPO transition into an MPO at the end of January? And then on March 1st, we started holding bi-weekly coordination meetings with the jurisdictions. How can we help? What do we need to do? There's a few items that need to be in place prior to being designated. Now, we were required by federal law to be designated within 1 year of being identified. So we had to be designated by December 29th of 23. We were officially designated on November 9th of 2023, so we made it by just over a month. We had in June, we started holding local meetings with the elected officials because we got to a point where we had to have decisions made. At the work level, at our bi-weekly meeting level, we couldn't make decisions. We wanted the jurisdictions to make the decisions. We wanted Minot, Burlington, Surrey, and Ward County to make those decisions. It's not a DOT organization, it is the jurisdictions. We wanted them to make their own decisions. So there are 3 required planning activities for an MPO. It's the Unified Work Program, or the UPWP, which is an annual document that is for 2 years. It's the current year and the following year. The second year is unfunded. This is a new process for North Dakota, so we're still trying to get into it. We've had 2-year UPWPs in the past, but we also had 2-year contracts. So now we have 1-year annual contracts, so we'll have a rolling UPWP. The TIP, or the Transportation Improvement Plan, similar to our STIP from a statewide standpoint. A TIP is the federally funded projects within the MPA area. And the first TIP is required at on December 29th, 2026, along with the MTP, the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. Similar to an LRTP, or the Long Range Transportation Plan for non-MPO areas, the MTP is a 20-25 year outlook. Currently, the MPOs are looking at 2050 and it identifies the short, medium, and long range plans. We're getting ready to send out the RFP for the MTP. We have a few ideas, a few hurdles that we need to jump over yet to get that RFP out. The executive director of the Central Dakota MPO is out on the streets. We're looking for that person. Right now, we are currently set up working with Lance at the city of Minot engineer, and Dana, the Ward County engineer, are doing a lot of our heavy lifting from a local standpoint and pushing products through, getting RFPs ready to go, getting bylaws laid out, and getting all that stuff that normally the executive director would be doing. We have 2 engineers working on. So Fargo, our new TMA, this brings changes to Fargo as well. So as a TMA, they will select their federally funded projects off system, or they can identify those projects. Federal Highway is more involved. They are required to certify a TMA every 4 years. on a minimum. And then they will, MetroCog also gets a direct sub-allocation or a pot of money from the, on the federal side, so they will get the 200,000 plus pot of money. The pots are the 5,000, the 50,000, or 50,000 plus, and then the 200,000. Officially designated in, so this was a little bit different. This was known, kind of known, pending what the federal rules were going to be. Federal Highway actually completed a mock TMA certification back in 2016. So this has kind of been in our minds for the last 8 years. We really ramped up efforts in 21 and 22 through biweekly meetings to bring make sure that we were ready for TMA designation. We received official designation on June 5th of 2023. This was through a federal highway in the Federal Register. During this time, FM MetroCog was also in a transition period because they had recently hired a new executive director in May of 23. Now, all of the requirements are still there for MetroCog. They are still required to do all three of the planning studies or all three of the planning activities that the MPO was required, because again, all TMAs are MPOs, but not all MPOs are TMAs. But in addition, MetroCog needs to do a congestion management process, or CMP, within 18 months of being designated. And again, so they have until December 5th of 2024 to get it done. Again, looking forward, they actually did a nice job. They got it incorporated into their last MTP, which was their 2045 MTP. They're currently working on an update for their 2050. The US DOT, meaning Federal Highway and FTA, is required to have a federal planning certification review for all newly designated TMAs by June 5th of 2027, 4 years within of being designated. I am working on a couple agreement updates with our bi-state, because part of MetroCog is they have Moorhead and Dilworth as part of it, so working with NDDOT to get some agreements done. Also have to update the 3C agreement. Again, so the North Dakota DOT kept all the state highway systems through Fargo. So we will, projects on those systems, the main avenues, the 10th Street, University, the interstates, those all will still be programmed through how they were in the past, through the priority system. And then, again, so this picture shows the UZA of Fargo, how big that area is. Now, if you want to picture the MPA, it is west of Castleton on 994, stretches east to about halfway between Holly and Lake Park. And then north to south, it is starts down on Highway 46 and goes north up to Argusville. So from that is my standpoint, I guess, of how projects have been improved, or how North Dakota communities are growing. Again, this was a very high level overview, and with that, I can turn it over to Mike and Theresa.
Good morning. All right, thanks, Wayne. One of the things that Wayne went through that information fairly quickly in a handful of slides. That was about 18 months to 2 years of his life. And I appreciate all the work that he put into that. That was a lot of work, a lot of coordination, and we've had many, many successes because of all the work he's put in. So I appreciate that for everything Wayne has done. I'm going to transition here just a little bit to a little bit different topic. We're going to talk about no-cost project acceleration and using a PEL approach as it relates to the Grant Marsh Bridge here in over the Missouri River between Bismarck and Mandan. Okay, little agenda just to tell you where we're going, what we're going to follow. We'll talk a little bit about how did we get here, why are we doing this, what's the reasons for this this process. We'll talk a little bit about how we're interacting with our local agencies, our MPOs, and other local governments. And then I'm going to hand it over to Theresa, and she's going to dive into what is planning and environmental linkage, or PEL. And then what are the benefits of PEL, and then she'll kind of tie back in how did we use PEL as it relates to the Grant Marsh Bridge. And then we'll open it up for questions. And that question session will be for both Theresa and I, and then anything you might have for Wayne. So, how did we get here? When it comes to the transportation system, the roadway network in North Dakota, and what the DOT manages, can I get a shout out of which roadways are the highest priority for the DOT to manage, own, operate, and maintain? Interstate. Good. I was afraid nobody would know the answer to that. You all passed. Great. So, as it relates to the interstate, that is a high priority for the department. We plan and we build around that as our main core system. It's important for the economics, the region of both North Dakota and the nation and our surrounding states. One of the elements that we determined over the last 7 years or so, or even a little bit past that, is that we found we had a little bit of a gap in that process, and that gap was interstate improvement needs in our urban areas. We were very good at our rural system, our linear system, but when it came to urban areas, we were almost more reactive than we were proactive. So about 7 years ago, we developed a team and we developed a new process, and we call it our UIPP, or our Urban Interstate Priorities Process. We've had a lot of people, some of the people in this room participate in that. It's a joint effort between many divisions in the department to go around and talk to our communities that are along the interstate system in our urban areas and talk about issues that they see locally. A lot of times we get anecdotal notes about we get wrong way movements here, we see a high intensity of crashes here, we could use more signage here, this infrastructure needs to be replaced. We've gotten really, really good feedback, and it's resulted in a number of useful, beneficial, and currently already built projects across North Dakota. So it's been a very good process. One of the elements that was identified out of that UIPP was, what do we do with Grant Marsh Bridge? It is a very large structure over Missouri River. It's an important element to North Dakota, not only because it is one of the very few river crossings over Missouri River, but it is Interstate 94. What is our future plan? How do we tackle that? That isn't just like a urban reconstruction for 5 blocks or a small box culvert or pipe replacement where we develop a scoping report, develop a project, get plans, bid it, construct it. This is a much bigger element to tackle. And what do we do? How do we go from there? From this UIPP and the idea to look at what needs to be done with Grant Marsh, it is an original interstate structure built in the 60s, and we've had recent increases in rehab project needs over the last 10 years, with a new rehab project actually coming this summer in 2024. So from this idea, we came with what's an engineering and feasibility study. A lot of other states in the U.S. have done studies similar to this, but it is very new to North Dakota. We don't have a process in place, but it was an idea that was thrown out there and kind of stuck, and it took some effort to develop what that might look like, what kind of scope do we need, working with other divisions, looking at other state examples of what might need to be done. This allows us some flexibility that we've never really experienced before. It allows us to blend some of the planning elements that are early on in a study or a project, but then bring in some of those engineering elements to help us feed the alternative development decision making earlier on that will then hopefully transition us into a future NEPA or roadway project or structure project. The process has been successful up to this point. We're developing it kind of on the fly and working through it, but it has led itself to be used on 2 additional interstate projects, one in Mandan and one in Fargo as well, incorporating that feasibility portion of the study. MPOs and local governments. One other element that this allowed us to do this feasibility study, we were able to bring in our local partners much earlier than we normally would. We're developing a roadway project, we send them an SOV letter, they get invited to maybe one steering committee meeting, they get invited to a public meeting, and they participate as much as we need them to and inform them of what's going on. What our goal here is to really bring them on very early, get them on board. We met with city staff, county, Parks and Recreation on both sides of the river. We even met with a township who's near the area, an incorporated township. We've met with other private industries. We've had conversations with the Huckleberry House that's right next to the bridge. It's allowed us to really engage with those people much earlier, get their feedback on, well, what do you think is the issues here? What do you think we should look at? Any other feedback you have? And they've also been able to participate then, since we've had them involved in the alternative development process, which has been really beneficial to get their feedback and get them into the process much earlier than we normally would. We've, I think, had some good feedback from them too, appreciating the involvement and the participation. And what they also then turn into are champions out in the field for us to explain the project, explain the study, and what's forward. Now, what is PEL, Planning and Environmental Linkage? We incorporated elements of this process into the engineering and feasibility study. And the reason for doing that is to hopefully allow this study to not just be a planning study that gets shelved and then maybe gets picked up 10 years from now and dusted off and we have to start some of it over. Our goal with incorporating the PEL is that we're connecting planning with the eventual environmental document or NEPA process, and this document basically stays live, it stays active, and allows us to just feed into that next process. So I'm going to turn it over to Theresa now, and she's going to go through some of the benefits, the steps, what the process of PEL is, and then she'll kind of bring it back to how we've applied it to Grant Marsh specifically, and then we'll open it up for questions.
So thank you, Michael, for that. I'm going to walk through the process that the North Dakota DOT is using for the I-94 Midway Grant Marsh feasibility study under the PEL process, like Michael mentioned. So PEL stands for Planning and Environment Linkages. It's an FHWA recognized process, and actually FHWA has guidance to follow as well. But essentially it allows you to make decisions, do analyses in that early planning pre-NEPA stage and carry that forward into the environmental review. So generally there are 2 types of planning products that we're talking about. There's planning studies and then there's planning decisions. And if they're done correctly, they can both be carried forward. So the planning decisions that we talk about, those can be program level decisions if you're looking at funding options or you're looking at programmatic level mitigation, maybe on a regional scale or a state scale. Or they can be project level decisions, so looking at purpose and need, identifying those environmental impacts, even starting to understand your mitigation. If you know in the planning phase what your mitigation is going to look like, you're really going to be able to incorporate it more easily into your project. So some of the planning analyses include traffic studies, land use studies, environmental background report, and those mitigation needs as well. So some of the considerations when you're using planning products in NEPA is, will those future year policy assumptions that you're using be consistent with those that you're using in the NEPA process? You want to make sure that what you're doing in planning is going to relate with what you're doing in NEPA. And were the methods that you used reliable, defensible? Are they consistent with other regional studies that are being done as well? And then you have to consider the lifespan. Some traffic studies, environmental studies have limited lifespans. So knowing what that is, you might have to refresh it, especially if you've had any changes that have occurred in the project area. You want to make sure that those are accounted for, that that information is still relevant and valid. Also is the information in a format that can be easily transferred into the NEPA phase. I'll talk about that in just a minute. And then were the correct agencies at the table? Did you talk to the FHWA, the local agencies? Were they part of that planning discussion? And then not only that, were they also part of the review and comment on the documents and analyses that you're doing? Because you really need them to comment on those directly. And then another part of that is that you have to make sure that the public and the agencies understand that these products are going to be carried forward, or the intent is at least to carry them forward into NEPA. And that's really important because you want to make sure that as they're reviewing it, they understand what the context is. You know, they might take a different approach to reviewing a planning study versus reviewing something that's actually going to be a decision that's going to be used in NEPA. So PEL is flexible. There are a lot of authorities in the federal regs that support PEL. And I'm not going to run through all of these. If you're interested, you can get the PowerPoint after, and they're here. But under CFR 450, there are empowerments under planning and assistance and standards. There are more under 139, efficient environmental reviews for project decision making. And then there are more also under US Code 168, integration of planning and environmental review. So you can see this is really well supported in the federal regs. But essentially these distill down to a couple of main points. Number one, the planning product needs to be developed according to federal law. Also in consultation with the resource agencies, federal agencies, tribes. And then on top of that, also you have to make sure that you're taking a broad multidisciplinary consideration of the transportation needs, the potential effects on the environment and the community. You want to make sure that you're taking a wide look at this, not just kind of narrowing your focus on one area of study. There are additional requirements in the regs also on top of what you would normally be doing for a planning study or a NEPA study. You also have to include a public notice that these planning products may be used in subsequent stages of the project. So that has to be publicly known. And then during the environmental review process, making those documents available, making sure that everybody has an opportunity to comment before you carry those forward. So if you do all that, some of the benefits from PEL that you'll see, a shortened project delivery time frame, so I'll show you that on the next slide. And the more you know about a project, if you know the needs, if you know what the environmental considerations might be, you're going to be better informed when you're programming these projects. So that's really an advantage. It also helps to coordinate with the local government. Of course, the more that you work with local government, federal agencies, resource agencies, you're going to have better outcomes at the end of the day. So what PEL does is that, you know, normally you would do your planning project or your planning phase, then you move into your project development phase, you start NEPA and then into design. PEL actually takes that environmental review, process some of those tasks and moves it into the planning phase, which then shortens, this works, shortens your project development phase and then saves time. Another thing that it does is that just like when you're better able to program your projects, you're also going to have a better idea of what the environmental scope needs to be. You'll be able to narrow that down, which could further shorten that project development time frame. And this is particularly true if you have more complicated projects with longer time frames. So PEL is also very flexible in funding. You can use planning funds, block grants to pay for some PEL activities. If you're doing a corridor study, if you're doing a feasibility study, you can use planning funds towards that. So if you're thinking about using PEL on your project, it's really good for complex projects. If it is regionally significant, if it has environmental constraints, maybe if it has a propensity to be really costly or controversial. Otherwise, also if it has multiple alternatives that might address the problem, that might be indistinct or confusing, something that you really need to work through, it gives you time to do that. And if you're looking to just define the scope of your project, if you're looking to understand that better. Also, if you have significant stakeholder involvement or regulatory agencies that are going to be involved, like Michael was saying, the earlier you can get those folks to the table, you're going to really build on those relationships. And that can help if you have one of those controversial projects, getting everybody informed early. So we ended up using this on the Grant Marsh project. It kind of checked all those boxes that I just talked about. It's regionally significant. It has environmental constraints. There's parks lining either side of the river. There's the river itself. It's complicated, so we're looking at replacing the bridge and how that works with the interchange and the interstates on either side. How is that going to work during construction? There's just a lot of options that feed into that. So the North Dakota DOT is using that to help establish the scope of the project and understand that better going forward. So I've mentioned a couple times, PEL is flexible. The speed at which you go is tied to the level of concurrence that you're looking to get from the agencies. So you speed through it quicker if you're just looking to get reviews and comments on the documents. If you're actually looking for concurrence, that's where things are going to take longer. So a full PEL process includes getting concurrence at all of your key checkpoints. Where projects have been landing more lately is this hybrid option, and that's what we're doing on Grant Marsh. So we're getting concurrence on a couple of items, and then we're doing review and comment on the remaining items. So it's kind of a mix, and it allows you to kind of control the pace of your study. And this is a progression of Grant Marsh. The items that are in blue are what we have decided to be the key decision points. So you can see on this next slide, here's what we're doing. We're getting agency review and agreement on the project purpose and need, also on the range of alternatives. And then we're looking to define and start to work through the alternatives that might be available, eliminate unreasonable alternatives, and then public planning and involvement all the way through. And then at the end of the project, we will document the decisions that are made, carry those forward. So we started by developing a list of relevant agencies. We did work with the FHWA to review the list, make sure that we had the right people at the table. We started, like Michael said, we started with an SOV letter, sent that out, but we also invited them to the public meetings. But agencies are, obviously understaffed, they're very busy, they can't go to every public meeting. So we also put on an agency webinar, and it was just a half an hour. We ran through what the study is, what our intent is, what we wanted to get out of it. We talked very in detail about the PEL process, and so that everybody understood that these planning products will be carried forward. And then after that, we followed up with a packet, and we sent those products to the agencies. We sent them the full purpose and need. We sent them the range of alternatives. And in the packet, we gave them a mechanism to respond either in concurrence or give us comments or both. So that was kind of a way to keep them involved. So these are the products that will be coming out of the Grant Marsh study. You can see this in blue behind me here. This is the notice, the public notice. This went on every advertisement that went out before our public meetings. This went in the invite to the agencies. This was in the packet. It's on the website for the project. So we're making it very clear that these products are intended to be used. This is a schedule for Grant Marsh. We're midway or better through the project. We've done a lot of background. We've done survey, we've done bathymetric survey, we've done environmental screens and some studies. We've done that purpose and need, range of alternatives. We've also done quite a bit of coordination. So we did 2 public meetings, held that agency webinar, and several stakeholder meetings, and then a couple alignment meetings with the FHWA, just to make sure that our process is in line with the federal regulations. So the study will wrap up in late 2024. Right now we're in the alternatives process. The draft study with some draft recommendations will be put back out to the public and to the agencies for their comment. What we receive back from that will help us to kind of formulate that plan to go forward, and then we'll finalize the report and the final recommendations. So these are some of the benefits. Michael hit on these, but basically improved relationships and coordination, enhanced community involvement, getting those community values into the study early on, and then working through the complex analysis. Talked about how complicated that kind of alternatives are that we're needing to work through. And that's really hard to do if you're waiting until NEPA to do that, because if this is an EA, the NEPA phase is about a year long. And trying to work through all of that and then also do the full environmental NEPA review in a year would be extremely difficult. So doing some of these things ahead can really help the DOT to meet that NEPA clock. And then at the end of the day, we'll have decisions and analysis to go forward to help the DOT inform their programming and funding. So we're working to transition this into NEPA. What we're doing is a PEL compliance checklist. So the FHWA has checklists. There are some states out there that also have checklists. We created one specific for this project that we're going to be using, but it basically makes sure that you're meeting all those federal regulations, and then it also documents everything that was done, how the decisions were made, who was at the table, what comments were received. All of that will be documented, so we have a full story to go with this. And then of course those comments will help us to formulate our approach going forward. So to incorporate these these planning products into NEPA, you can do it through reference in the document. You can attach it as an appendix item, or you can just take various components and move that forward into your environmental document. So for Grant Marsh, we have an environmental scan section in our feasibility study, and that was mirrored after the EA and EIS formats that the North Dakota DOT uses. So hopefully it'll be fairly seamless to get that information transferred forward. And just a note that the more inclusive your study is of what you're looking at, what you're considering, who you're talking to, it's going to have more value and it's going to be more broadly able to be incorporated into PEL. So I think that's all I had, so we can open it up to questions on both topics. Thank you. Right, the project is not funded. No.
So how do you manage your cities or locals who you're going through what looks like a funded project? Their expectations when they ask, well, when is this coming? And they kind of think, this is now, right?
Yeah, there is just a lot of communication on that, because that is what people expect when you're coming to them with kind of this level of information that we're looking at as part of PEL. That's the assumption, is that you're further along. So we do get the question. I don't know if there's, it's just making that clear, kind of explaining PEL and how this all fits in is really the best you can do.
So like on your website,
Yeah, we explain what the outcome of this study is, and we explain quite often that this is this is pre-NEPA. That's the one point we keep saying is we're not in NEPA yet. We have a long way to go. So, I would.
So the question was, when do we might expect money? So right now there is no money identified. We're reaching the point in the study where we're going to start getting some preliminary cost estimates. We just kind of have spot pie in the sky ideas right now. So once we kind of get some of those cost estimates, Then that'll really start the conversation of when could we potentially fund this? Do we need to pursue other funding opportunities, whether it's federal grants or whatever it might be? How much do we build altogether? Theresa kind of tied on it a little, or touched on it, excuse me, a little bit, but the way Grant Marsh is situated with the west side of the river, and it's tied into those loop ramps and that interchange that goes to Memorial Highway, continues on the interstate, goes on to Maine. If we move this bridge or replace this bridge, we're getting into all of that roadway network at the same time. So it isn't just the bridge, it's all of that area. So the economies of scale just increases even that much more. So that's what's even more important about this study, is trying to understand all of that. So funding will be a challenging question because of the scale and scope, but we will need information like this to help us get to that point someday. And then reminding the public why we're here, what we're talking about, and reminding them that the size and the scope and the scale requires us to kind of step through this process slowly. We're here, we're engaging with you, mainly to tell them that, hey, we're thinking about this. This isn't just something we're going to throw on you at some point in time.
Oh, yeah. Miguel is asking how the ability to eliminate alternatives is shown in the federal guidelines. I think we could probably back it up. It's really hard to see that. So right here in US Code 139, it talks about being able to reject the alternative after considering public comments. So it goes through talking about making sure that the public has ample opportunity to see it and that you're considering the comments. But yeah, it is in the federal code.
Our hope too is that this study finishes with maybe more than just one alternative, that we've got options moving forward.
Yeah, you really don't get down to a preferred alternative. That isn't so for this study, this study is 2 to 3 alternatives. You're really more eliminating unfeasible alternatives rather than getting down to a preferred alternative.
Yeah, so Wade's question is relating to work that our MPOs do on the planning side. We had an effort on a couple studies within the Fargo-Moorhead MPO to try and utilize PEL, where the MPO would kind of start a planning process and then they would turn it over to the jurisdiction, whether it be Fargo or West Fargo, and then they would carry on and develop the project and fund it. I don't think the MPOs are pursuing that as much anymore. I think they're probably waiting until there's more defined guidance from maybe us in North Dakota as their lead state, and maybe someday we can get there with doing studies like this. I think, and you know this, but one of the things we found with that study is that we did have money programmed for those projects. It was in the STIP, it was programmed, funded. Unfortunately, what we found is that the end goal of wanting to fund a project was actually pushing back on the planning, and we weren't getting the detailed planning that was desirable from the local communities. You know, you like to lay that planning work and let it feed through a flowed process. Unfortunately, that funding was pushing backwards, like you don't have time, you got to get this done, you got to utilize this funding. So they experienced that with 2 different projects, and I think some of the comments locally were related to that need to have a little bit more time.
Yeah, the FHWA does have a guidebook. Actually, they just released a new one, I think, right? Yeah, they just released a new one. So if you just go to the FHWA website and search for it. And they do have a variety of checklists and kind of questions and answers, all sorts of information. That's probably your best bet. There are some states who have done quite a bit of work too, like Colorado has a really in-depth guidebook. I just would be a little cautious. Colorado goes kind of beyond where a lot of states have decided to go. So, you know, kind of have to take that as with a measured approach.
For Wayne? What else? Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.